Have you recently walked into the romance section of a bookstore and wondered, where have I seen those characters before? Have you noticed how many of the book covers seem to be featuring a familiar looking pair? I just know I've seen those characters somewhere. Well, you aren't alone. You aren't going crazy. I've seen them too. Hi, Happy New Year. My name is Suchi, and welcome back to my channel, where I talk about the stories that I love and that inspire me. Different setup today, without all of the usual fancy twinkly lights, because I wanted to show you guys my laughably tiny bookshelf on this fine January morn. I know my previous videos focused on film and TV, but I do in fact occasionally read books. And today I want to talk about an interesting phenomenon that's been sweeping through the romance novel publishing industry. What is a book about a woman in STEM grad student fake dating a professor, having a vampire for a roommate, a When Harry Met Sally retelling, or a sweeping epic fantasy where shadow and light magic collide all have in common? They all began their lives as Reylo fanfiction. Yes, the rumors are true. The publishing world loves Reylo fanfiction. Over the past few years, these kinds of books have exploded onto the romance novel scene, becoming booktok sensations and Goodreads darlings and New York Times bestsellers. They are so popular that these books collectively have sold millions of copies as of late 2023, and more are on the way. You couldn't even avoid them if you tried. Because if you walk into the romance section of any bookstore, those Reylo books are going to be there, strategically perched on those cute little display tables to grab your attention and your money. Now, fanfiction being published as original work isn't exactly new. The 50 Shades of Grey series by E.L. James is a thing that exists, for better or for worse. It's definitely for worse. Which of course started out as Twilight fanfic and was published in the early 2010s. We also have The City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, which came out in 2015 and was adapted from her Harry Potter fanfics, which centered on our favorite Slytherin bad boy, Draco Malfoy. Now, Twilight, Harry Potter, and Star Wars are huge IPs respectively, but why are we suddenly seeing an explosion in Star Wars fanfic being published? Like, what is it about these space wizards that has readers in a chokehold? Like, how did we get here? Well, it all started on December 19th, 2019. Actually, no. It started 2 years before that. It started in December of 2017 when Rian Johnson's masterpiece of a film, The Last Jedi, came out. Because in that film, Reylo went from being a crack ship pipe dream to actually being a central part of the sequel trilogy story and a very likely endgame for these two star-crossed characters. For context, Reylo is the ship name for Rey and Kylo Ren / Ben Solo, two new Star Wars characters who were introduced in the film The Force Awakens in 2015, in which they started out as bitter adversaries on opposite sides of the war between the Resistance and the evil regime of the First Order. But then The Last Jedi came out and the enemies weren't quite enemying anymore. The foes were slowly but surely becoming hoes. And so the Reylo fandom pretty much exploded in popularity from that point on, because the chemistry between Rey and Kylo Ren was so palpable that even people outside the fandom were picking up on it. Articles were being written left and right on their push and pull dynamic and the will they won't they of it all. In short, Reylo was creating a lot of buzz, both within fandom and in mainstream media. So much fan art and fanfic and meta-analysis were being churned out between 2017 and 2019 that you almost couldn't keep up. If you were on Star Wars Twitter or Tumblr at the time, there was just so much Reylo content being created that even if you weren't in the Reylo fandom, you were bound to come across it at some point on your feed. There was no escape. So basically what I'm saying is, Reylo was the biggest thing to come out of the sequels. I said what I said. I think one reason for its meteoric rise in popularity was because Reylo as a concept hadn't been done in Star Wars before. Because Reylo is made up of several rather polarizing tropes and themes, like enemies to lovers or finding connection in someone who's your direct opposite. And a concept like enemies to lovers hadn't really been touched by a major IP like this before. Even the themes of redemption and pulling yourself out of darkness to return to the light, these had been explored before in the original trilogy, but that was between a father and a son. It hadn't been from a romantic perspective. Reylo offered the implicit promise that Kylo Ren would return to the light, to his mother Princess Leia, and to Rey as Ben Solo, all because Kylo Ren met Rey, someone who challenged him and his beliefs at every turn. I think these themes are decidedly more adult and mature, and they bring up interesting points about how we grow and change because of the people that we meet. Or, because the Force decided to bond us with the person we love to hate, who just so happens to be shirtless and have an 8-pack.
And he said that Kylo Ren had an 8-pack. But Kylo Ren was shredded.
The point is that Star Wars surprised everyone with Reylo. Like, nobody was expecting it. They made a frankly bold choice by leaning into the romantic angle with these two, but because they did it in a way that made sense for the characters and the larger themes of Star Wars, at least in The Last Jedi, it worked and it drew people in. So by the time The Rise of Skywalker came out in 2019, Reylo's popularity had reached a fever pitch. They even got a Vanity Fair cover. The number of tweets mentioning Rey or Kylo Ren skyrocketed throughout 2019, and Reylo consistently ranked highly on other fandom metrics like Tumblr's most popular ships or AO3's top fanfics. Like, a truly insane number of people on the internet were wondering how their relationship would play out in the end. It was truly a moment for the culture. But then The Rise of Skywalker actually came out, and the Reylos got what they wanted. But at what cost? I'm saying they as if I'm also not a filthy Reylo. Yes, at the end of the film, Reylo was canon. We got a big, sexy space kiss. But also Ben Solo died? And Rey ends up alone, staring blankly off into a sunset while a couple of ghosts look on. Honestly, a shitty ending, mate. At least the rest of the internet unanimously agreed on that point. You know, it's certainly a choice when you set up a character who obviously is going to have some sort of redemption arc, only to half-ass it in the last part of your trilogy and ultimately kill him off instead of granting him the chance at living and atoning for his past and healing together with the person he loves. It's just interesting. Truly something Star Wars has never done before. Real trailblazers, these Rise of Skywalker writers were. Really inspiring and hopeful ending there, killing off your redeemed hero just as he returns to the light. And so I, along with the other Reylos, were gutted. We were so close. We could have had it all, but instead, we were rolling in the deep. I mean, I guess if you pause the movie right here and stop watching, then that's where the movie ends, right? Right? But Reylos are a spiteful bunch. If something isn't done right, we're gonna do it ourselves, and we'll do it better. There are a lot of talented people across all fandoms, and there's nothing quite like the failure of a canon story to bring out the spark of creativity in all of us. It's like genetically ingrained in our fandom DNA. If we love something and it disappoints us in the end, we're gonna pour everything we have into fixing it. And that's pretty much what happened here. There are a ton of talented writers and artists in the Reylo fandom, and clearly publishers big and small have noticed. And I know there's this whole discourse on the validity of fanfic and whether writing it is real writing, but here's a smoking hot take for y'all. All writing is real writing. I know, insane statement to make in the year of our Lord 2024, but also I'm right. Because writing is an art form that takes practice to master, and fanfic can be a great way to sharpen your prose and world build and find your writing voice. But most importantly, writing should be fun. And what's more fun than taking your favorite IP and putting your own spin on it? Fanfic can be incredibly cringe, yes. Sometimes it's just like a wall of self-insert smut, or just the most unhinged premise you've ever laid eyes on, and that's what the people want. But also some of the best, most incredible works I have ever read in my life are fanfics. I say that with my whole chest. So if you're one of those soggy light bulbs who put people down just because they like to write fanfic, go outside. See the sun, eat some ice cream. It's not that deep. Alright, I'll get off my metaphorical soapbox. So in short, The Rise of Skywalker dashed all of our hopes and dreams for a cohesive Star Wars story and a happy ending for Reylo. So a bunch of boss-ass women decided to write their own Reylo stories and publish them. Iconic. In 2021, The Love Hypothesis by one Ali Hazelwood came out, and the traditional romance novel publishing industry would never be the same again. Okay, so perhaps that's a little bit dramatic of me to say, but also it's true. Because since then, a whole lot more Reylo fanfics have been published, with more on the way as we look to 2024 and beyond. I do want to point out here that Reylo fanfics have been published through indie routes long before they took off in the traditional publishing world, but they have varying degrees of quality. A lot of these are like obscure self-published works on like Amazon or whatever, and don't have a high chance of getting popular because they don't have an agent or a marketing budget. Also, some of them just aren't that good. But if you're very lucky, you might just get Jenny Nicholson's attention, and she'll devote a whole hour-long video to your take on Reylo.
The book begins with a graphic sex scene. Wow, that's just like Star Wars 2. Protected from the persistent sandstorms that buffet the planet's surface. Oh, buffer. Buffer? I don't think the book has that right. I think I had that right.
Honestly, Black Moon Rising might not be literature, but it'll always have a special place in my heart. It's painfully cringe, but also I can't stop reading it. Just like Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So, like I said, 2021 arrived and The Love Hypothesis was published. And the cover is the most unsubtle thing ever. Ali Hazelwood, I will be seeking damages. I'm just kidding. I love you. But seriously, this cover will forever be the most iconic one because it's just so blatantly Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley. I just want to know what Adam and Daisy were thinking upon laying eyes on this cover. I would give my firstborn child to know this information because they both had to have seen this book at some point by now. There's no way they haven't. The next time Adam Driver hosts SNL, there needs to be a sketch where he walks into a bookstore and all of the covers on the romance books are just various versions of his face. Because that's our reality. We live in this society. Also, I want to shout out this book by Marin Taylor. This is the most egregiously Reylo book cover I've ever seen. I love it so much. Anyway, going back to Ali Hazelwood, The Love Hypothesis is a romance that started out as a Reylo fanfic and thus has main leads who look like Reylo. But this goes a step further because the MC's name is Adam. Incredible, like no words. This book has nothing to do with Star Wars, by the way. There's no spaceships or intergalactic war. Instead, it's a female grad student named Olive who finds herself fake dating a formidably grumpy, socially awkward professor named Adam at her university. Is it remotely enemies to lovers at all? No. And yet the themes that made Reylo what it is are still present, and that's what drew so many readers in. I read this book when it first came out, before it blew up on TikTok, and I really enjoyed it. I'm not a huge fan of fake dating tropes most of the time, but I really liked Ali's take on it, and the fact that this was in a STEM academia setting, which we really haven't seen in mainstream media before. The main couple had great chemistry, organic chemistry, if you will. Okay. I'ma see myself out. And even the supporting characters were fleshed out pretty well. Did it have its fair share of awkward and cringe moments? Yes, this is a rom-com, for God's sake. Take a look. But all in all, this was a solid read for me. And The Love Hypothesis was an absolute hit. People everywhere were reading it. It was a BookTok darling from its publication and throughout 2022, and it's still being talked about to this day. It has since sold over 1 million copies. And since I'm a finance girly in my day job, let's break down what this means numbers-wise, shall we? Let's say that each book sold costs about $12 on average. This is being conservative because hardcover editions often cost a lot more, but we'll go with this. $12 times 1 million copies sold. Ali Hazelwood's one book has made her publishing company at least $12 million as of today, and that's a very conservative estimate. Reylo clearly makes bank. And publishers seem to understand this, especially the big ones. Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, these two behemoths are absolutely jumping on the Reylo train because it makes them a buttload of money. And in the years since The Love Hypothesis, publishers big and small have been printing Reylo books like hotcakes. We've had My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine, You Again by Kate Goldbeck, and most recently, The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon and A Knife, Seasoning, and a Dash of Love by Katrina Kwan. And there's a ton more out there, but these are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. Most of these books have hit some sort of bestseller list, and both The Love Hypothesis and The Hurricane Wars have since become New York Times bestsellers. In short, Reylo is an incredibly marketable concept and clearly appeals to a wide audience. Unfortunately for Lucasfilm, they didn't understand this when writing The Rise of Skywalker, but all these boss-ass women did. Look at all this money they're making, Lucasfilm. That money could have been yours too, had you known how to write a satisfying conclusion to a 40-year-long saga. One of the biggest bag fumbles of this millennium, honestly. Like, y'all have lost the plot in the most literal sense. There's a few reasons why Reylo fanfic is so appealing to both publishers as well as readers. I think for publishers, it's the fact that a lot of the time, these authors have already amassed a sizable following of loyal readers through their fanfics. It's low-hanging fruit for these publishers because these authors with pre-existing fan bases are almost guaranteed to generate significant book sales. This was the case for Ali Hazelwood and especially for Thea Guanzon, who in my correct opinion is one of the finest authors on this planet. But we'll come back to that later. The other reason for Reylo's commercial success is that the ship is basically built on the same classic tropes and narratives that have defined other famous romances. Probably the biggest narrative reference for Reylo is I mean, do I even need to say it at this point? Pride and Prejudice. Yes, Jane Austen's magnum opus is the blueprint for Reylo. It takes the grumpy sunshine, the mutual mischaracterizations, the tall, dark, and handsome versus small and feisty, the rich man and not so rich woman. Reylo takes all of these beloved themes from her novel and basically repackages it into something new. Not all published Reylo fanfics have the enemies to lovers trope, but they still have all of these other themes. It's a tried and tested formula, and honestly, why fix it if it ain't broke? But the best of these Reylo books don't just use these time-honored tropes. They remix them in ways that feel fresh rather than formulaic. I do think some of Ali Hazelwood's later novels fall into this trap. Like, they all start to feel like the same sort of book after a while. But The Love Hypothesis is her best work because it really did bring something new to the table. There's also a very Death and the Maiden imagery associated with Reylo. This is a narrative trope that's been around for thousands of years across many different cultures, but it really took off during the European Renaissance. It's an artistic motif where death is personified as this dark, skeletal creature and paired with a young, beautiful woman. Often they are portrayed as lovers, where the woman represents life and youth, whereas death represents darkness and decay. Other times the girl is being seduced by death, which represents her loss of innocence. Reylo makes heavy use of this imagery, especially in the Star Wars films. But the Reylo dynamic doesn't straight copy-paste the Death and the Maiden trope. It's remixed in a way that deepens their characters while still keeping their individual agencies intact. Rey is the young hero who represents light and life. She's the Jedi who's going to save the galaxy. Kylo Ren is the Jedi killer. He represents darkness, something scarred and broken. Rey is bright, sunlit summer. Kylo is cold and dark winter. What makes this compelling is how these opposing characters play off each other and come together. That they are more similar than they realize. That they both have inherent good and evil within them. And they both heal from whatever trauma they've been through, not because they fixed each other, but because meeting each other eventually gave them the inspiration and strength to turn things around. This yin-yang quality is honestly really fun to watch play out, and when done right, creates incredible tension and drama. Pretty much every Reylo book uses this dynamic in some capacity, and that's why readers connect with them, because this interplay between the light and dark aspects of these characters reflects the most primal parts of our own selves. Actually, no, Suchi. You're wrong.
Reylo is actually toxic and abusive.
In fact, why didn't anyone tell me these books used to be Reylo fanfic? If I had a nickel for every time I've seen this type of comment on a Reylo book, I'd be rich. My dude, my guy, it's enemies to lovers. Enemies, by definition, are supposed to hurt each other. The point of these kinds of relationship arcs is to go from something mutually antagonistic to something mutually supportive and loving. It's how the characters come together in the end, even though they start out hating each other's guts. It's the growth. It's totally fine if this kind of story isn't your vibe. Like, that's a you problem, but maybe don't bash other people for liking it. It's just not cute, love. Lastly, the publishing world loves Reylo fanfic because it's romance. Why does that matter? Because romance is the most popular book genre in the world and rakes in over $1.4 billion every year. Romance sells. Why does it sell? Well, I think George Lucas said it best. If the boy and girl walk off into the sunset hand in hand in the last scene, it adds $10 million to the box office. Basically what he's saying here is that people in general are drawn to happy endings. It's what we always look for in our own lives, so of course we gravitate towards that optimism in the media we consume also. Obviously, tragic endings are popular as well, but the most enduring stories are the ones where the characters achieve their dreams in the end, and where they get to live their lives the way they've always wanted. The story with the happily ever after endures in our memory because it's what we would want for ourselves. Because happy endings justify the journey it took to get there. Otherwise, all that pain and suffering just isn't worth it. Like, what was the reason? I know I wouldn't want my mans to die right after he saves my life, and after all that time spent being enemies and dancing around our feelings for each other, just straight up D-wording after having spent a lifetime of loneliness and misery. Very cute, very fun. I loved that little wrinkle. Romance as a genre is inherently tied with happy endings, and it's the promise of that hopeful and satisfying conclusion that brings audiences in. Because even if we can't have it in real life, at least it could happen in fiction.
We're calling this controlling what you can when things feel out of control.
Lucasfilm did not, in fact, take George Lucas's advice here, which was, which was a choice. If they had, maybe The Rise of Skywalker wouldn't have had the lowest box office revenue out of the entire sequel trilogy. Rey and Ben Solo didn't get the arc nor the conclusion that they deserved, but Reylo authors decided it didn't matter. They can write their own universes in which these characters do get that happy ending under different names and identities and stories, and they'll do it better. And based on how many of these kinds of books are becoming bestsellers, it's what the people want. It's what we deserve. Guys, thank you so much for watching me rant about Star Wars yet again. Don't worry, I will keep doing it. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have read published Reylo fanfiction, what did you guys think? Which ones were your favorites? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will also be linking some Reylo books in the description down below for you guys to check out. You know, if you've been living under a rock or something the past few years and didn't know this was a thing. A couple of these books were recently targeted by the whole Kate Corain fiasco and have been pretty heavily review bombed, so if you're interested, please give them some love as well. Also, I am currently doing a reading vlog / review of The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzan, who, I kid you not, is one of the most talented writers on God's green earth. She's probably the most famous Reylo author of all time. All of my favorite fanfics are by her. And The Hurricane Wars is her debut novel. It's an epic fantasy romance filled with magic, really intriguing world building, and a true enemies to lovers arc. Like, the main characters are literally trying to K-word each other. Miss Thea did not come here to play. It's awesome. I'll be posting my video on this book at some point soon, so please stay tuned for that. And that's all, folks. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.